So the American founders wanted a presidential selection system that would yield men of continental character, that would elevate the most experienced political men in the land and the most responsible political men in the land, not demagogues, not not momentary comets that streak across the sky, but people you knew and could count on in a way. And yet you say, apropos of the 2012 election, and modern, and perhaps even apropos of a longer period than that, you say, quote, instances of demagoguery have been frequent and are on the rise in modern times, unquote. What do you mean by that, and give me some examples?
Well, if you look at the series of candidates that we've had, I won't say necessarily the nominees, but all the candidates that have played a role. You have some who have played harshly on fear and have also stimulated grandiose hope. So look at some of our candidates. Pat Robertson was a candidate, not exactly the sort I believe the founders would have in mind. Alan Keyes was a candidate. Al Sharpton was a candidate. These are characters and human beings who are using the office, the schedule of the presidency to begin a political career, not the capstone of it.
Or a radio career.
Or a radio career.
Right.
So now, the question is, you could say, well, none of these persons was nominated for the presidency. They did influence the character of the campaigns during the primaries in many instances. And when we come to 2008, we have an extraordinary case. Barack Obama was one who came without the usual qualifications you would assume for the presidency. In an extraordinary way, came from the outside. I'm not saying anything about him personally because he showed a lot during that campaign, but he certainly represented a kind of comet from the outside. If you set aside his personality and ask if you want to continue to select presidential candidates in that way, persons who have very little public record, whom we know very little about, is that really the direction that the founders would want to go or that we as a nation would want to go?
And his lack of executive experience prior to that, would that have been, from the founders' point of view, a worrisome thing?
Executive and very sparse public record generally. A couple years in the Senate, most of the time in which he wasn't there. So he was really a state legislator from Illinois. In fact, people didn't have much of a feel for what he was as a person, and therefore projected a great deal upon him.
Which he was well aware of.
Yes, he considered himself a sort of Zelig character or a Rorschach test, and that worked very much to his advantage. He didn't have that much of a record. If you want to go back to the founders, you could say that they were not, it's wrong to say that they were hostile to popular choice. The people were going to have an extraordinarily important role. But the role was to be a judgment of the record and performance of either individuals who were well known or, of course, presidents who had already served a term. That was I think, the basis of this choice, rather than what they said during a campaign. And in the case of Barack Obama, he was able to pull himself from relative backbench obscurity by a speech at a national convention, and then by the campaign. He made his case for the presidency inside the campaign rather than prior to it. That's a very significant change.
You write about, you have, among other things, you are a great namer of political phenomena, and the rhetorical presidency is, I think, one of your coinages. What is that? Obviously, Obama is, I think, a prime example of this, but what elements are bound up in that, and what does it mean for American politics that our presidents now are rhetorical in a way they weren't before?
Well, another characteristic of the founders is a sort of a mistrust of popular speech generally. You find that a little bit in the Federalist Papers. Not a mistrust of deliberative speech, but a mistrust of popular speech, for the same reason that they weren't very keen on having campaigns for the presidency, worrying what popular rhetoric could do. Going back and instead of celebrating the politics of Athens and celebrating Pericles, quite the contrary, they were very dubious of this, and not only of Pericles, who's referred to, but I'm sure all the other persons who took place in the assembly in Athens, including Cleon and the others.
But is this reflect a mistrust of the people that we've outgrown in some way?
If we go back to the progressives, I mentioned the idea of a popular leader and popular statesman. The defining characteristic of the good statesman in the campaign, according to Woodrow Wilson, was rhetoric. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the rhetorical presidency, which was not just me, but a few of my colleagues. We wrote an article together, but it was really modeled, I think, initially on observing what Wilson had said. Mm-hmm. Rhetoric is the defining characteristic, and not rhetoric in office, but popular rhetoric. And the idea was not only to change the way in which we select the president, but at the same time to change the presidency. Mm-hmm. And the two go hand in hand. It's not as if the president stops his rhetoric the day that he's elected. He continues to govern in some way using the same tools and instruments. In Wilson's case, it was coupled with the idea that the character of this rhetoric would be inspirational. So the idea, in his view, was that the statesman would always be an uplifting sort, a person who could touch something in the mass populace. And that's become characteristic. I think, in a way, Barack Obama is the exemplar of this, beginning in 2008, someone who touches something not only in the American public, but across the world, and rose as a meteor or a comet in an astoundingly brief period of time.
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, hope and change were the perfect uplifting slogans, unlimited by any substantive content, but somehow reviving faith in the possibility of progress and hints in progressivism, sort of bringing liberalism back to life. And he certainly seems to have succeeded, given that he was reelected, albeit by a diminished margin. But still, it was an amazing thing to win a race in a year of very bad economic doldrums and many other problems, headwinds, you might say, that he faced. Looking at the 2012 election as a whole, is this, would it be fair to say, as many people on the left are saying now, that this is a confirming election, that it proves that the big changes that Obama made in his first term have now been approved by the American people, and that we're in apparently an age of an emerging Democratic majority, and maybe we face a generation of Democratic and progressive dominance of American politics?
Yeah, if you'll permit me to say something about the campaign, since we're on this, is to compare the 2008 campaign and the 2012 campaign as campaigns. If in 2008 it was hope and change, I think we're now living after hope and change.
Right.
There's no two campaigns that are more different than those. 2008 was based on uplift. It was based on inspiration. 2012 was taking care of business. It was a completely different campaign run by a candidate who appeared to America in a completely different way, namely as a tough politician willing to scratch up the other candidate. Mm-hmm. The candidate and the campaign took pride in its tearing down of another person. Instead of this being a post-racial era, the first thing they did after the campaign was boast about the various ethnic groups they had gotten together. It was like a night and day as between those two campaigns. And I hesitate to see which one is better. Obviously, Obama preferred 2008. You could see that by the way he was behaved. He was happy.
And his victory speach was very much an echo of 2008.
Yeah. Obviously, who wouldn't prefer 2008? But from the point of view of both himself and the country, I much prefer after hope and change. As you said, 2008, hope and change was a vague idea to which no one really could live up to that standard. 2012, at least we're back to politics. I'm happy that we built the wall between faith and politics and reinstituted the sacred First Amendment. Now, we'll come to the politics of this, your other question. It was a status quo election in one sense, on the surface, because you had the same president, the same House, the same Senate with minor variations. It looked pretty much the same. We woke up the next day and all the players were the same. The problems even seemed to be the same. And the election victory of Obama, viewed historically, is really unimpressive. That might not be being said today because people have an interest in denying it. But if you look at it statistically, he's the first incumbent to be reelected who's lost his share of the American vote. So that's unimpressive. But it is a confirming election in this sense. The major changes that Barack Obama wanted to accomplish were done in the first 2 years of his administration.
Right.
And all he had to do was win, and in some ways those are consolidated, barring some major changes in the next 4 years. So merely by keeping the keys of the office, he accomplished a great deal of what he set out to accomplish. You could say he doesn't have to do anything for the next 4 years, and he still will go down probably among liberals as one of their most important presidents.
A face on the liberal Mount Rushmore.
A face on the liberal Mount Rushmore, exactly, I'm sure, which will be built with federal funds.